You started in development, yes?
Yeah, so I'll give you the background. I'll give you the, like, what is this and how?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
So I work at a company called PsyOp. PsyOp is a creative studio / production company. Generally, we work in advertising, and we make TV commercials.
Okay.
Sometimes we make interactive things. Sometimes we make original IP of our own. Most of the time, it's content of advertising stuff. So we do Coca-Cola. We do Clash of Clans. We did a really popular anime style couple of spots for the state of Oregon, Travel Oregon, in a kind of Studio Ghibli style. We reinvented their state as it would have been if Miyazaki perhaps imagined it. And so we don't really have a house style. We do all sorts of different stuff: 3D, 2D, live action, mixed media. We make VR. We do animation in game engines. We do all sorts of stuff. And we have a lot of friends in the advertising world and the brand world. Sometimes brands come to us directly. Sometimes they come to us via their advertising agencies. In the case of KFC, they have an advertising agency named Lickin. They're very popular. They're based out of Portland. They do Nike and Coca-Cola, among others. And we work with them frequently. They're a kind of top tier, very great ad agency who has earned through the years of successful work the opportunity to pitch their brand partners really weird ideas.
Yeah.
KFC is one of those brands that is always trying strange stuff. The reinvention of the kernel, all the tie-ins they do. They've got a partnership with WWE right now that's really interesting. And someone at Wyden Kennedy decided it was worth exploring this space of anime and dating sims. So the way it works in advertising is an agency they make a brief that explains what they want to do, what their idea is, and they distribute it to multiple production companies, and that's called an RFP, or request for proposal, and then we propose what we would do with that brief. And in this case, the brief was, hey, anime is really huge, and dating sims are a really fascinating way into that world. And it would be really interesting to explore a dating sim starring Colonel Sanders, who is, such a celebrated character, historical figure, mascot. It would be a really interesting way of exploring this character through a branching story. And so we sent them a proposal of like what we thought it would look like if we did a dating sim based on Colonel Sanders, and the general sort of top line idea of if you attended school with Colonel Sanders, a young Colonel Sanders. And I happen to be an aficionado of dating sims, a lifelong anime fan, and I created a visual novel of my own at PsyOp, the company I'm with other team members there. But I got to sort of narrative direct that game. That was called Camp W, and it's kind of a friending simulator. It's an all ages indie game on Steam that we created in-house, where you're a young witch who is hiding away at summer camp for humans, and you are meeting all these other campers, and you're designing your camp schedule around the activities that appeal to you, and getting to know the kids associated with those activities. So if you do a lot of kickball, you get to know the kickball kids. If you do a lot of arts and crafts, you get to know the arts and crafts kids. So I was very familiar with this kind of dating sim structure, visual novel genre, and so I said to my coworkers, if we don't get this job, I have to resign and shame, because it is like it's made for me. Anime fandom, dating sims, interactive media. They wanted to launch this game on Steam, a place where we launch games, and I'm very familiar with that platform and the audience. So we pitched our vision of sort of how we would approach this, and they decided to partner with us. And so I became the one of two sort of creative directors on the job, and the game director and writer. I have a teammate named Trevor at PsyOp who is more focused on the sort of art direction and the trailer cinematic direction specifically, because they had to have a kick-ass 30-second trailer.
It was an incredible trailer.
Like a TV show opening, like a really good anime opening. So we worked with it's really hard, I explained to my panel, it's really hard to just hire an animation studio out of Japan. Netflix, Crunchyroll, Hulu, all these platforms have recognized the popularity and funded all of these studios to make what it is they're making. And basically, every animation studio in Japan is booked. You can't just hire them to do a 30-second one. So we worked with a team in London called Shoto Pop, right? Big anime fans like us. 2D hand-drawn animation is what they do, small studio. And we worked with them on the trailer, and then we did all the game development in-house, picking some sort of specific freelance artists from the world of sort of anime fandom to help us really nail the look. And KFC kind of let us run wild. Wyden was sort of our creative partner, you know, we worked together to build mood boards and think about who the characters are. And I had the Wyden Kennedy team to our office, and we did like a writer's room where I plotted out the entire script as a flow chart and wrote sort of scene outlines, and we just jammed on like, you know, what is the ins and outs of these characters' personalities? What are the type of food they would cook? What would their power moves be named? You know, what are the sort of miniature adventures we want to tuck in here? And we just put like, what is the craziest stuff we can think of that fits into the stuff we love about animation and anime specifically? And how could we work that all into a coherent, and you know, as coherent as you would expect an anime to be story.
Yeah.
And it was like a 4-month process really to make the entire game and launch it. We worked really fast to get it out there, but luckily it really connected. It feels like people appreciated it. People saw that we, the people making it, appreciated it and treated it with respect and care, and made sure every decision was from a sort of high-end point of view.
Yeah, you did it very high status and faithfully to the community, and that's like the biggest compliment I think I can give you is like, I played it and I absolutely loved it, and I got immersed in it to the point where every once in a while I just step back and remember I'm courting Colonel Sanders, and I chuckle to myself.
Yeah.
I think the corgi as the professor was a particularly inspired choice.
Yeah, I mean that's just one of the, you know, there's a lot of anime references to pull from, right? And you can make a lot of choices. For me, you know, Cowboy Bebop's a foundational part of my personal anime history, and I know with our character designer it was as well.
So you plugged in.
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, we played with the ideas of other breeds of dogs. We drew a number of dogs, some of our staffers' dogs, you know, like who would work well. And then sort of as we developed the personality of the character, there's something about that sort of short thickness of a Corky that says like, that's a tough guy, but also a cute guy.
Yeah.
And so like, you know, we tried to make sure that even while the characters are very referential, you know, you can see aspects of shows in there. You can see a little sort of Joestar-ness in there. You can see like, oh, are these Kill la Kill references sort of in here? Is this pose like, you know, who are these characters hating poses that I'm familiar with, or saying lines that I'm familiar with? They're just designed in an aesthetic that I'm familiar with. But sometimes we're mashing so many references together that they become something new, or there's a sort of improv technique of like A to B to C, and then when you take the B out in the middle, you wonder how you could have gotten to A to C. And you get really fun ideas and really fun, you know, iterations of your ideas that way. My favorite detail of like all the references tucked into it is Pop, the kind of lovable maybe child who doesn't really belong in this. He seems out of place.
Yeah.
We were just like channeling Ralph Wiggum as much as we could.
Oh God!
And like people,
I see it.
Yeah. And you know, for me, animation is a global art form, and like we have this subgenre we call it anime, right? But that's just a translation of animation, given an accent. And animation is actually, so many of the shows that we like are internationally derived. And you know, Simpsons isn't entirely animated and made in America. Like there's animation happening in Korea to power The Simpsons. And when I was a kid watching, you know, my favorite cartoon of all time, Batman the Animated Series, that's a cartoon that's made in Asia, right? You know, you have an American team of writer-designers, they're storyboarding, they're shipping those boards off. Those boards are being animated in Korea largely, but sometimes Japan. And with the volume of episodes of a show like that, they're actually splitting those episodes up, and some episodes go to this studio and some go to that studio, and then it all comes back to the the team at headquarters. And I didn't really understand that, growing up. I don't think many kids do. You don't care about the origin of the frame that's drawn.
You just want the next episode.
You just want the next episode. You just want more cartoons. And for me, I felt like I ran out of cartoons, like I devoured cartoons. And then someone told me, like, on the other side of the planet, there's, like, all these cartoons. And they've been, like, stacking up for decades, but they're being made faster and at a greater volume than they are over here. So, like, if you want cartoons and you're willing to just sort of open up, like, Asia is a huge place for cartoons in Japan specifically, right? Even though a lot of anime is actually, made in Korea in the same way, in the same pipeline. Or China, Indonesia, Philippines, wherever these days. So it's all just animation, right? It's all just cartoons, and stories are all just stories. And I've become an animation director, game developer, but my degree is in English literature. The stories are always what I was the most interested in the end. And having the opportunity to like break down your favorite story tropes, your favorite character archetypes, and build a custom story around them with the platform of the popularity of this world-renowned, food franchise is a huge opportunity. Camp W is a game that myself and my teammates we put a lot of love into, but it's a new IP. It's not something anyone's really familiar with. It's all ages in a way that is, people are looking for a little edge, looking for a little humor, perhaps. And that is a game that slowly accrues players, and occasionally someone's streaming on Twitch, and occasionally someone sends me an email, and it's great when they do. KFC, as soon as we whispered that it was coming out, people were just like, "Oh my God, KFC game! Like, could this be real? Is this real? How can this even be real?" My phone is ringing, my email's blowing up. People are like, "Is this even real?" And then 2 weeks later, after announcing it, we put it out.
Yeah.
Because it was already done when we announced it, and that was something we did on purpose. It was like everyone's looking at it, and I was so glad that people actually played it and saw oh, this is a story. Like, this is a 3-act structure with characters and growth and events that take place, and it's wacky and weird and funny. But in the end, it's a story you could describe to someone. It's not just like a bunch of memes piled on top of each other. It's got some of those in there, but it was nice that they really thought. Well, the strength of this concept is that these visual novels, these dating sims, are storytelling devices. And people can spend a lot of time with this. And one of the things that why we said up front is can this be 2 hours long? And it was it can.
Definitely.
I mean, especially if you're going to read it out loud on a Twitch stream or whatever, it can be 6 hours long. It can feel much, much longer as if you really read it. And getting to spend that much time with an entirely unique world that I got to help form, and then I can just tune on Twitch. It's Valentine's Day, so there's 100 people streaming it right now, and I can just rifle through those streams and watch people read this script that I got to direct and sort of creatively lead with wonderful coworkers and collaborators. Really, just a fun thing to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You mentioned 3 things that really caught my ear. The first was one of KFC's other partners in the WWE being WWE, of course, over the top, flamboyant, just ridiculous, all sorts of stuff there. And then you having a company much like how KFC is, all being pulled together by an English major, which is the thing that I found to be very interesting. I myself and my mom retired board of education down in Chicago, so she's been, and her field of study was also, her major was also English. So I was just finding it interesting that at the core of most of the better stories that we usually hear, there's usually somebody much like you. There's usually somebody who is not necessarily, you wouldn't think that an English major, you wouldn't think that English, anybody who comes from that field may necessarily be the thing that brought all of these different forms together. I guess my question would be, when you hear an idea like that, this is who KFC used to work for, or works with now even, how do you, and this idea of bringing a dating sim together, something like that, what does that do when when you first heard about this, when you're what can I do, what's the toolbox, how can I play with this? What was that thought process when you went through that?
So it was a couple things. I think the first thing I wanted to do was make sure that I was treating the two halves of the source material with respect, right? So one half is Colonel Sanders, this person's real person, right? Turned mascot, turned sort of character, but he's still a real person, and that's important to, you know, even if I'm going to be having a laugh at, you know, with him and with this version of him, I want to make sure that it's done respectfully, and then that sort of filters down to the rest of the cast of characters. Even if I'm pulling these tropes out of other shows, the Team Rocket style rivals, right? I want to respect the characters that I'm referencing, the culture that I'm referencing, as well as the characters that I create, you know? I think that that's really important and was important to everyone. And the second half of that, the other thing is the anime and visual novel genre and subculture, which is a thriving community online, and as a fan and member of both of those sub-communities, communities that are just really getting going now and have been sort of around in the shadows for a while. And so, like, I was someone who, as a teenager, when I discovered anime, I started going to Otakan in Baltimore. And it was pretty big already at that point in the year 2000. But anime culture was not, right? You know, and I was from some small town and I was getting, you know, VHS tapes of anime. And then I was going out to IRC and I was hanging out in chat rooms and distributing fan sub bootleg anime with other nerds.
The good old days.
Yeah, the good old days. And so you don't want to punch down at a community that is already feeling, you know, relegated to this subgenre of subgenre of subgenre of subgenre. You know, I don't want to manipulate their fandom and then serve it up as a joke for the general population. And that was never requested. You know, that wasn't the brief. But that's an easy sort of trap to fall into. Is like quick, cheap laughs. And that's why part of the like 2-hour runtime of it is important, is because you can't sustain cheap laughs for 2 hours. Like, that's a lot of cheap laughs. I find it much easier to sustain like an actual heartfelt story about someone like struggling to be better. Like, that's an easier story to create over that period of time. So I think the first thing I did was try to envision, you know, based off the brief that I got, which is like, we want Colonel Sanders at a school, you attend school with him, you know, romance, rivalry, etc. I wanted to make sure that I was doing good, you know, honoring the people who this was really for, who would actually spend the time to play and actually stream it on Twitch and actually sit in the channel and maybe a Discord, you know, channel with their friends and read it out loud. And then I wanted to make sure I was actually honoring the people who gave me the opportunity. You know, KFC and Colonel Sanders himself. And it's tongue-in-cheek, it's self-aware. They didn't have any problem with, you know, the way I treated their food, the way I treated their characters, because I started off on the right foot, and it was very collaborative. You know, I wasn't like off in a cave just doing this thing and then presenting it. I was checking in regularly. We were having group brainstorms, so it wasn't all me. I mean, I'm the writer, and then I put my fingers to the keyboard and wrote. But it was informed by a greater group of people all interested in doing a good job. And interested in contributing fun and humor along the way. And getting some references of their own too. That's fun.
What was I mean, it's a strange property at first, but was there anything during development that you just kept coming back to and being like, man, this is weird, I don't know if they're going to let me do this? You know, the funniest thing is the only real no that I got that was like some pushback was we made Colonel Sanders cry a lot, maybe too much, in a kind of emotional, like, sentimental level of crying. Misty-eyed.
Yeah, well, we had him much weepier, and they thought, like, he's a little weepy. Could we like make him just slightly more stoic as a character? And like, that was it, you know, in that entire game that you played, the rest of it was like they were encouraging us to go further rather than pull back. Obviously, you know, we didn't set out to do things that would be problematic. We didn't set out to make it extremely violent. We didn't set out to degrade anyone, any of the characters in the game. And we wanted to imbue the characters in their physical shape, in their skin tone, in their points of view, with a diversity that I think is representative of the audience. Because again, animation to me is an international passion, and we wanted to make sure that this wasn't like, you know, and we do have a very diverse team, but we didn't want it to be just fully like some Americans making fun of Japanese culture. It was more like, you know, inhabiting this culture and using it as a platform to tell a story that honors it and shows off the full global nature of the trade-off of animation.